Thank you very much. We're really excited to be here, have a chance to talk with you all about big data and how it's affecting the human experience. You know, we're going to talk amongst the panel for about 25, 30 minutes, and then we'll leave some time for questions from the audience. If you guys have questions, we'll make sure to answer the easy questions. I guess just to get started, you know, we all know there's been a lot said about big data. Certainly a lot of key drivers around that with shift to mobile, a lot more social, growth of the Internet of Things, a lot of cloud-based services. So as you think about, you know, some of the key trends that are happening across different industries, different parts of life, whether it's, you know, health or automotive or retail or whatever sector you want to talk about, I'd love to get your initial thoughts about how you think about this topic and where you see the most exciting opportunities.
Well, I think there's if I can go first.
Yeah,
I think, first of all, I think if you look at the four horsemen that we saw earlier, or even everybody that's the fifth one, that may be a fifth one, all these companies are built around data. Yeah, and I think this is stuff that we've been doing for a very long time already. But it's exciting to see how this moves into completely new areas, and I think there's huge opportunities there. I mean, not even thinking about home automation and stuff like that, but think about just the stuff that we can do in health. Yeah, I think if there is a next barrier where we can have major impact on society or on life in general, I think it's definitely in healthcare. Yeah, there's such huge inefficiencies around data sharing, bringing data together. We already see this with quite a few pharmas like Bristol Myers Squibb, for example, bringing clinical trials back from 60 days to a few hours, things like that. Major impact. So all the way to the other side, I think, where we see many more devices becoming data generating enabled. And especially, I think, the industrial Internet of Things will be massive generators of data, which will have built complete new businesses, but also bring efficiencies to businesses that could never have been done before if you didn't measure it.
Nash?
Can you guys hear me okay? Just turn it on. I'm going to have to talk real loud. Again, just as context, I've spent the last about 7 years in this data space. I'm now a venture capitalist. So I was the first general manager for IBM Watson. So we commercialized Watson after the Jeopardy game. And this topic that Werner is talking about, we spend a lot of time figuring out exactly where is the technology going and where are the opportunities. Before I answer where it's being applied, can you hear me or not? Okay. When I have to shout,
is there a hand mic
over?
Maybe. Survive the 30 minutes at that decibel.
Maybe we get your microphone fixed now.
There you go. Why don't you go ahead?
Go ahead, Chris, and then we'll either get a mic up here or get it turned on in the next minute or so. That'd be great.
Well, I was gonna wait till you finished. You're talking about the present. I want to talk about the future, but I would be even more radical. I would also say I spent the last 15 years trying to teach machines how to problem solve properly. And I would fully agree with Werner that the next step is probably healthcare, and the only thing that is slowing it down is regulations. Because if you want to build a doctor today, I think the data is available, medical data is there, artificial intelligence to do diagnostics is there, the knowledge that is needed to actually do diagnostics and come up with what needs to be performed on a human, let's call it that way, is there. So the only thing that is missing is the step that can we actually solve the problem. And today, your body doesn't come in single parts. You have a single expert for every kind of your skin, your hair, your tummy, all these things, and a machine can easily combine that. I think that the experience is going to change dramatically as machines move into us not just using them, but they are acting on an eye level with us. And data is the foundation to do any of it.
Yeah. Can you guys hear me now? Great. So in terms of the applications of data, you know, when you look at what's happening to the data has been produced for a long time. Two things are happening. One is the volume is going up, and second is the nature of data is shifting. A lot more of unstructured data, you know, tweets and reviews and pictures and movies is what's coming out. And right now, industries like healthcare and all can benefit from it, but computers don't understand multi-structured data. Computers today are nothing but giant calculators. They only understand zeros and ones and structured data. But when you start combining machines that can reason across unstructured data, like tables and tweets, or understand images, and start applying into areas like healthcare, like Werner's talked about, but also every part of the business, from procurement to how you do customer support. When you start getting a fuller picture of what it is or who it is that you're dealing with, I'll give you a small example. In the case of healthcare, if you're a farmer in Iowa or sub-Saharan Africa and your kid comes running to you and says, I got bit by something, and I don't know what it is, and all you have with you is a mobile phone. Imagine being able to take a picture of that and send it to this, what we call as a cognitive cloud, not a computational cloud, but a cognitive cloud, and it comes back and says, there's a 72% chance it's a spider bite, there's a 47% chance it's a snake bite, here's the triage information for snake bite, and here are 7 doctors in the next 50-mile radius, and here's a review from better doctors on who's better or not. Do you want me to call it for you? Right? This is where you're taking multiple types of data sources and using a delivery mechanism like cloud and mobile and applying it deep into verticals.
What you're really describing now is a phenomena that has started a lot in the retail sector and is expanding into others about next best content, next best assortment, next best X.
Action, yep.
Right? Next best action, about really being able to break a problem down and figure out how to serve content to enhance an experience. And I'd love to get your thoughts about that and where you see it going.
No, and I think much of when we look at big data, we've always been sort of looking at it from a reporting kind of standpoint, yeah? Right. Looking backwards, creating reports, telling what happened, and things like that. What we do here is all about prediction. It's all driven by machine learning. It is all driven by the idea that you can, based on the past, based on a set of features and based on your algorithms, you can create a system where you can ask, go with a picture, or you can go with an order to it and say, what's the score of fraudulent for this order? Yeah? What's the chance that this particular product is counterfeit? All of these kind of things is where you can build very simple systems that can actually do that for you. And these days, let me just plug what we just launched, the Amazon Machine Learning Service. That makes it, you no longer have to be a machine learning expert to actually build machine learning systems. And so you can now integrate it into any of the systems that you build with just a few clicks, and these things are gone. So the technology is there at the fingertips for everybody to start using and build predictive engines. And whether that is recommendations or whether that is building using healthcare systems, it will be pervasive.
Let me kind of build on what just Werner said. I think this notion of reporting, in about 10 years' time, we'll look back and say that was such an antiquated way of doing things. The fact that you take data, then you process it, then you look at it. Someone said it well to me, data analysis, big data analysis today is almost like the American game of soccer, American football, right? Where you run a play, everyone huddles together, read something, then you go on and run another play. Business doesn't run that way. I mean, as a car enthusiast, it's more like a Formula One race, right? You're continuously running, you're continuously getting insights being fed into you, and you're not stopping, and then trying to take action. So this whole emphasis on data being mastered and worked on by the specialists, this data analyst, and then feeding into the business, I think that has to be removed. And the systems of tomorrow, which I call as systems of insights. We went from systems of records to now where we are is systems of engagement, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. Where we're going to now is systems of insights, where data and insights are being fed into you in your business process naturally as you're acting on it, and not by a third party who's reviewing it 2 hours later and coming and telling you what you should have done 2 hours ago.
Yeah, so real time versus batch.
Yeah.
In past was batch driven. These days, everything, both, it means that ingestion as well as processing, as well as storage, all of these things need to be able to work in a very timely fashion.
It's actually worse, right? Especially in business, we make decisions in such a very, very strange way. In business, people say, oh, like 67% of all businesses our size and in our vertical adopt cloud computing, so we should be using cloud computing. And then they call that data analysis. That's pure, I'm not even going to say it, but it's reporting based, it's backwards based, and so on. Imagine what would happen if you say like 67% of all successful general bombard hills. You go and bombard a hill if you're a general. So this is how business decisions are made today, and that is not data-driven. Data-driven actually means that you're trying to predict a non-linear future. It's not about telling you, okay, I'm at 6 now and I'm going to be 10 tomorrow. The question is what things are going to happen, and you call it insight. I'd say it's reasoning. What you want to know is why is it happening.
So we're contrasting two extremes here. One is truly automated, real-time decision-making, automated by machine learning and improving the next best action. The other is business intelligence and how do you enable decision-making distributed in the organization. Is there something in between there?
That's a great, can I just take that? I think, you know, I talk about this notion of BI versus AI, but not AI as artificial intelligence, but AI as augmented intelligence. You know, think Jarvis, not HAL, right? Where we're trying to replicate everything into a machine. How do you replicate a machine to do stuff that you yourself don't understand, how the brain works? So a little bit of AI when you surround a knowledge worker with the insights to be able to do a job better. So one example, I'll give you another healthcare example. A large hospital in Dallas that we worked with, these are care managers who work with kids who have asthma. And their job, there's 70,000 kids that they manage in the city of Dallas, and there's 70 workers, they have 1,000 kids each. Every morning they get up, they look through their scheduling system to see which patient missed their appointment, then they start calling up and they say, show up at a hospital, I don't want to show up at an ER. One of the things we did using a big data type of a cognitive system was to say, you know, it's not just enough to know you missed the appointment or you need to show up. You need to start understanding if it's pediatric asthma, where you live, what is weather.com and pollen.com saying about what's happening in the environment. So if pollen.com tweets and says there is a ragweed outbreak that's likely in that particular zip code, a cognitive system that understands data, both structured and unstructured, can disambiguate the tweet, understand that ragweed has a correlation to asthma attacks, and then come back and tell the care worker, here's what I know. There are 19 kids in that area that are going to be affected by this. 4 of those live in a zip code that they have transportation issues. 2 of them are going to show up at your ER. So that's the prediction part. And then after that, it'll say, here are the 4 things you can do. You got to go to prescription. Now that I know this is what's going to happen, beyond prediction, you got to get into prescription to say, send them an inhaler. Here's a phone number for the schools. Call them up and say, keep the kids inside, or whatever the thing might be. So a true system that uses data not just predicts, but also prescribes what is the best action to pick on your next best action word.
Or prevent.
Yeah.
Because I think if we look at a continuously aging population, the cost of healthcare for elderly people will be going up tremendously. And so the earlier you can find out factors that are impacting their health, the more predictive, preventive healthcare you can do. And that can happen at home. Most elderly people that end up in the hospitals end up spending an enormous amount of time in the hospital, which is extremely costly. And most of those cases are all preventable if people would have had the right data moments before that so they could act on it.
So what we're describing here is, if we think about what are the challenges or enablers, rather than focusing on the technology and the sensors, but maybe there are things around how do we get the data to be provided, how do we get the connection to occur, how do we enable the system to actually close the loop?
Well, I think there's a number of technology players that are going that way. I mean, we're working, for example, with Philips Healthcare Technology. They're building a platform where you have all these different devices that can connect to data flows in there. You can put actuators on it. You can build all this stuff that you want to build. And quite a few other companies are doing similar kind of approaches. But it's all, the majority of that is all driven towards being able to prevent versus then to actually act later on.
I also think, I mean, to your point, I think there is too much emphasis on technology, not enough on outcomes. In fact, I'm predicting that in the next 18 months, you will see hundreds of Walking Dead. You'll see hundreds of software companies dying because this space has been overinvested. And what people are looking for is to lease a car. But what these startups are doing is they're building a brake and a car seat and a hubcap. These are the models. There's fascination with building models and technology, but not enough on outcomes. To do that, you really have to take an outcome-in view and not a technology-up view.
Well, but the real question about these things is, you say that the big data space is overinvested. I would fully agree. You call them Walking Dead. I would call them cheap acquisitions because most of these guys have built good technology and they've pretended that you can actually do data science without understanding science, which is not true. Which is kind of sad, but it still is true. You have to understand the math in order to get anything out of the data. What I think you'll see there is not just a shift in the usage model, like to user-centric use case-centric kind of building, but what you also see is the question of what part do the humans play in this. Currently, we're trying to act this whole thing without humans.
I'd love to build on your thought, Chris, and your thought, Manoj, about outcomes and user-centered design. That a lot of the focus around data is very much around conversion metrics and driving behavior, and it's very algorithmic around how do we drive an action we can measure and quantify. Down the purchase funnel, did you adhere to the script, things like that. But where is the emotional connection, and how do we think about engagement and the big data and helping enhance emotional connection?
But that first part
actually was one thing that I actually wanted to also answer. This related to this on your previous question. You said there's either predictions or there's backwards looking. I don't think so. And if you look at backwards looking, there is still two big categories. One was the traditional business intelligence. Yeah. You knew already what you wanted to see in the report. That drove your data model, that drove the data you're going to collect. Now, in terms of engagement models, which are much more real-time and can be now, doesn't necessarily have to be any predictive engines associated with it, but it is all about unstructured data, many more data sources. We within Amazon, we may have tens or hundreds of data sources per customer, but if customers also allow us to hook up their social media, their Pinterest, their Facebook, their Twitter feeds, things like that, the things that we can do for them is a much greater than that. But it's all unstructured data, yeah? And so that's a very different one where you take a very iterative approach to, there is a pot of gold there. You do not necessarily know what the pot of gold looks like, but you're going to dig for it, and it's going to be very iterative. You don't know what the data model is, and you collect as much data as possible. And you'll do it over and over again if you find better algorithms. That was stuff that never happened in the original business intelligence.
That's a key word you use, the iteration. This whole notion of fail fast and fail forward. And particularly not around technology. I think the real winners in this space is going to be people who focus on outcomes and people who focus on design. Design that engages you, design that, and a great example, I think there's a whole new class of applications that are yet to come about. Uber is one kind of it. Waze, one of my favorite cognitive application, which guides you through. So the smartphone truly really is a dumb phone today. It doesn't really do much smartness, unless you have a Waze-like experience or an Uber-like experience where it starts augmenting your human cognition, right? When I talk about the notion of Homo sapiens are dead, Homo digitus is where we are going. It's that cell phone that's going to extend your brain and start really sort of guiding you like Waze does or Uber does. I think the people who will win are people who will design the right solutions that can drive outcomes and engage you, as well as design the right business models. And why is it that Uber is valued at $45 billion or whatever the numbers they are? They're not a taxi sharing company. They're saying they're a logistics company, right? They're saying they can deliver you a pizza in 10 minutes because I can put anything. I don't have to put a human being in that. I'm actually going after Amazon Prime. Instead of 2 days, I'll give it to you in 10 days. Now Amazon's launching new things. So I think you see how each of these technologies, I love the fact that you guys are opening up these models, and I think that will foster a whole new class of next generation Ubers that are going to come about. So this notion of outcomes and design, I think, is where the technology world needs to shift to, not just algorithms and models.
Or did you want to make a prediction too, Chris?
Probably. I actually wanted to give an example. So we've applied our technology. So we're doing this totally wrong, but we've been doing it for so long that maybe we have the cloud. So we've applied our technology to automate IT operations because that is the biggest waste of time ever. And I always thought, being this technologist, the best way of automating stuff is if you don't see anything afterwards. So the machine just did the work, period. And I found out that is totally unacceptable to users, right? Just stuff happening, even if it's exactly the things you wanted to happen, doesn't work. So building an interface that will make machines accessible, the way machines make decisions, the way machines interact with us, is true in both ways. And we find this at the second time is we still need teachers for machines. Machine learning is nothing but experimentation, and the easiest way is to use a bigger machine learning thing, something like this, and apply it to machines. And that works best when you actually make a game out of it. And we've done this with the community. So knowledge acquisition for machines is an interface question, just as displaying what machines do for you.
I guess we have about just over 10 minutes left. I'd love to give you guys each an opportunity before we open it up for questions. If you had to look out in the future and say, where do you think our to keep an eye out if you look over the next year where we're going to see interesting things happen? Where are you going to be looking? Where are you going to be looking for things to unfold?
Man, there's so much stuff happening. So one thing earlier on, you said about different data sources, video analytics massively taking off. And for example, often retailers ask me, oh, where can we start with data? So, well, you already have a lot of data, which is all your security footage from your stores. You have tens, if not hundreds of cameras around your store because you continuously track everything.
An exploding set of first-party data.
Well, you feed it through the analytics and you know exactly how customers move through your store, through what kind of promotions they stand still, things like that. So this video is something no longer to be watched. I think Dropcam has already demonstrated that. It becomes something to analyze and to action on. So that's one thing. An area where I really am excited about is the whole industrial Internet of Things, where massive sensors are being inserted into everything, whether GE puts it into their gas turbines, or Tata Motors has 200,000 trucks on the road in India. They break down frequently. So they put sensors in there, they put a little GPS modem in them, and now they can start doing preventive maintenance on them, and they know, and the breakage down goes, the efficiency increased enormously. It's a great story again by GE at M.Saxena Hospital. It's a story where normally people come into the hospital, there is an intake desk there, they talk to you, they put you in a room based on your symptoms. And these guys that were running that room there, they had a lot of knowledge, had been there forever, a lot of intuition. So what GE did is actually instrument every patient, every diagnostic equipment, every worker in the hospital, collected all the data. And do you know where patients spend most time? Waiting in front of elevators. And why? Because they were placed in the completely wrong place for all the diagnostic things that they had to go through. And by actually making this a completely data-driven approach, M.Saxena Hospital can serve 10,000 more patients a year while saving $200 million. Wow. Yeah? And those are the kind of numbers, those are the kind of efficiency numbers that you see. They start doing the same thing now at airports. Instrument every piece at an airport and just figure out how are these things moving? What are the efficiencies that can be done? There's so much new innovation happening also in this whole area of the industrial Internet of Things, young businesses as well as large corporations actually really going about.
I was at a dinner event recently where the kind of internet czar for the city of San Francisco was talking about how they're partnering with corporations to leverage the Internet of Things to drive, optimize the airport, optimize the roads. There's enormous sets of places you can leverage data for collaboration now.
The city of Chicago, Charlie Catlett runs the Urban Center for Data Science. They have placed sensors all throughout town, not really tracking people, but tracking noise, tracking all sorts of other sensor data, and then using it. And that system is open source, is now being applied in many other cities. Philips built a new system called City Touch, where every light, every street light is these days an LED light, gets a small sensor into it, GPS modem. You can remotely control, first of all, get all the data about efficiency, but also can control the lights, the color of the lights, the intensity of the lights. So there's a match in this football stadium over here. The train station is over there. It's 11 o'clock at night. You create a lighted path through the city to guide people back to where they need to be.
So do you guys want to make any predictions before we get questions? You have a
to build on what Werner said, I have never been this excited about technology since I saw Mosaic back in the mid-90s. I mean, so much so that I left my job running IBM Watson and I became a venture capitalist, right? And I think any industry, we have this very unique thing happening right now, and the IT industry has never seen this in the last 75 years. We've got 5 of these, cloud, mobile, social, big data, all of these coming together, analytics, all coming together at the same time, when you also have a new user, the millennials, who are coming at it at the same time. The amount of innovation and disruption we're going to see in the next 5 to 10 years, I think we're just at the beginning of it. Every industry, particularly information-intensive industries, like healthcare, financial services, telecom, insurance, I think we're going to see a massive amounts of new decision sciences and new decision support stuff. Every business application and every business process would have analytics, I think, woven into it. The second part of it I'm excited about is infrastructure, security. Anytime you instrument the kind of things that Werner talked about, security becomes an incredibly important thing. So we look at this as 3 major buckets of opportunities: deep industry-oriented solutions, infrastructure solutions around security or cloud computing, next generation clouds, And then lastly, services companies. I think strategy and change in consulting companies are going to have a massive rebirth in terms of how they did ERP and how they let companies adopt and use ERP. What is the enterprise insights?
Well, to that point, one of the key changes we see, as an advisory consulting firm, is changing the nature of strategy to be much more around human-centered design and agile, rapid prototyping during the strategy process as opposed to writing a report.
Right on.
So I think that both of these give great input to my prediction is going to be much more simple. I think there's two major things to watch out for. One is old companies dying. And that is because of the Internet of Things and the new accessibility of data and customers that are out there. Whoever does not accept this, whoever does not adopt it, is just out of business. Now, with all the data and all the sensors in there, the connection between what we used to call the high tech and the new economy and the real world is growing stronger and stronger, and it opens up the real world for high tech business models. That means not just the data intensive businesses, every business is up for attack and it's up for disruption. And it is because it becomes more accessible to people who didn't have to go through the 50-year experience of how to build a fridge. They can actually invent one like this and print it. And I think that is super important because I've been part of a study. We figured out that if Facebook was opening a retail bank, they could produce an account at 98% cheaper than a bank. Imagine if you run a bakery and someone comes to you and say, by the way, I can bake the same bread like you do, but if you produce it for $1, I can do it for 2 cents. And that changes business quite a lot. So whoever doesn't adopt this is going to die, and I think this is amazing in terms of economic disruption that is happening. And the second thing for MyBee to watch out for is people who start adopting working with machines rather than working against machines or having machines work for them. People who start augmenting themselves by using machines rather than using machines as tools, I think that is a big thing. And you'll see that in technology companies, but you'll see it throughout other kinds of businesses when people start augmenting themselves. Consumers start with it, but now I'd say the big step is when businesses adopt it as a defense against dying.
So I'd love to see if there's time for 1 or 2 questions from the audience. If anybody has something you'd like to ask us, definitely raise your hand and we can see if we can give you an opportunity. Otherwise, I do have other questions. Yes. Need to get him a mic. Scream it out, I can repeat it.
Yeah, right.
My first question, I'm Lorna Kunat from Davis, California. So my first question is for Werner Vogels. Amazon.com has already opened up the use of artificial intelligence tools. Does that mean it's going to the next level of AI for its business model? And the second question would be, how do you think the government and the corporate sector innovation group startups can start a conversation?
Well, the last one is a harder question to answer, so I'll do the first one. First, I find artificial intelligence a very hard word. And being a former computer scientist, I just divide it up in 2 major buckets. One is natural language processing, and the other is machine learning. There might be other areas that are relevant, but I think in terms of what we call AI, that's sort of the 2 big buckets. In terms of technologies, definitely we'll continue to launch, improve our machine learning tools, build them out further that we do. The story there is that without these services, we had 2 very experienced machine learning engineers trying to build a gender prediction service, sort of based on your name and sort of your history processing. It took them 2 months to get somewhere into, I think, 92% or 95% accuracy on that. Using these new services that we've launched, a young engineer with no machine learning experience can actually get the same thing in about 20 minutes. Yeah, and I think sort of the speed up of these kind of new services allow us to actually break open a whole new range of functionality. And of course, this is in the first phase is a categorization. It's basically supervised machine learning. You tell them what kind of categories you're looking for, what kind of bins you want to put it in. That's simple, yeah? And we'll obviously continue to build these things out into more elaborate algorithms and things like that. I don't know, maybe somebody else wants to take the question around how government and private sector, everybody's very interested in these kind of things, yeah? So, and I think governments are using our services just as much as that startups and enterprises are doing.
Because the government systems are still in the legacy mode. They're not familiar with the cloud system and
but I think that's a general problem. But I think that's a general problem beyond sort of machine learning and things like that.
Society always evolves slower. Society always evolves slower.
But no, I do think we've seen recently a number of moves, especially I think in Washington in the federal system, to really radically change the speed at which development is happening. I think Vivek Kundra already, when the first CIO of the federal government, already set this whole new thing in motion with a cloud-first strategy and things like that. So the desire is there to move faster. Plus, I've also learned how much waste there goes into IT, how much dollar waste, which could be much better applied to other programs in the world. You know? Running a website for $1.5 million that should only cost $30,000 a year, it's a very big deal.
In the spirit of moving faster, I know we're the last thing between you guys and drinks and dinner. So I don't think we have time for any more questions, but we really want to thank all the panelists for being here tonight, and thank you, and happy to continue conversation over drinks for those who are interested. Thank you.
Thank you. Werner Vogels.